Tonight we have Christin Kaiser, who's an advanced master gardener and the creator of the Wright Museum's Victory Garden. She's going to present a program on the internment camp, Japanese vegetables and recipes. Christin tells me that her mother, Virginia, is the reason she's like this.
Blame it on your mother, it's always good.
She was an avid gardener. Virginia was an avid gardener, and she created rock gardens in her days off from being a registered nurse. I imagine that was some probably helpful to...
Oh yeah, she'd set me over in the corner, give me a shovel, and my grandmother always said, you eat a peck of dirt before you die.
There you go.
Well, I could have died 20 times by the time I figure out all this pecks of dirt.
And Chris said she was digging around in the soil before she could walk, and I think we all were like that, but I can't grow anything. They all die when I grow them. So, Kristin's passion for nurturing the land and for raising food sustainably has led her to become University of New Hampshire Extension Master Gardener in 2012, and then in 2015 she traveled halfway around the world to go to Rockland, Victoria, Australia to take part in a program that's put on by David Holmgren, who along with Bill Wolfson are the founders of a thing called the Permaculture Designer Certification. And that's a course that she took, and it's part of the permanent agriculture movement that really is one program that teaches that people should work with nature and not against it. And so that led her to become elevated to the status of advanced master gardener. And so growing up in a family like that and having that interest, it's only natural that Christin is our gardener here for the Victory Garden, which we have in the back. There's nothing in there right now, but when you come back later in the summer... Oh,
No.
okay, I'm sorry.
Last fall, I planted shallots, bunching onions, and garlic, because everything we do goes to the food pantry. And you know, the clients at the food pantry are not going to get shallots and garlic from the state fund, and even from their own garden, they just don't have the room.
No, they're delighted. The food pantry, Christin has done the garden for the 8 years I've been here, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I approached you the first Christmas that I met you at Festival of Trees, and you and Gail had already thought about putting one in.
yeah.
So it was an easy job for me.
So for 8 years, we've been giving that harvest to the pantry, and happy to do so, and they're happy to get fresh produce. I don't want to give too much of a background, but I should give. Christin has asked me to give just a little bit of a background. The internment, the Japanese immigrants came to Hawaii and the West Coast long before 1924, when the United States put in effect that people from Japan could not immigrate to the United States. And many of those Japanese who came from Japan they were farmers. And so when they got to the United States, they and their offspring, who were American citizens born here, bought a lot of farmland and began doing a lot of farming.
Marginal farming.
Yeah, marginal farming. But at the beginning of World War II, by the time World War II got here, it's interesting that they grew about 40% of all of the vegetables and fruits that were grown in California. So they were very good at what they did. And after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, of course, there was a lot of anti-Japanese hysteria, and part of that was on the West Coast, especially because that's where most of the Japanese lived. And the three forces really that made that raging hysteria was fear, of course, of invasion, and then racism and a desire by a lot of farmers on the West Coast to get that land back so they could use it, because the Japanese were doing such a good job raising crops. So in 42, FDR, President Roosevelt, signed the Executive Order 9066, which authorized the military to take the land along the West Coast all the way from the bottom there up to Oregon and inland, and make that an exclusion, and no Japanese American, either from Japan or ones who were born in the United States, could live in that area, and they were moved out to what they called relocation centers, but now, which we now know were concentration camps for the most part, in a lot of different places in the United States. And so, when they decided to move all the Japanese out away to these relocation, in some cases they had a couple of days, in some cases they didn't have but hours to get all of the things that they could take with them. And a lot of farmers and a lot of business owners had to sell their business for nothing because they needed the money and they couldn't own the businesses, they had to sell them. So what they brought along with them were clothes and things, but they also brought some seeds and things for ornamental plants, and also to grow vegetables and things with them too. So they used those when they got to the concentration camps. And of course these camps were in the worst places you could possibly be. In many, many cases they were on Native American land, which was hot and arid and dry. And they had to really work, the Japanese that were interned had to really work to make those lands work for gardens. And so the government was very happy that they did that, because they didn't want to, in their case, waste the money on the internees, because they wanted to use it for everybody else. And so they allowed them to go on and grow their own gardens and eventually be able to supplement their diet, which was very poor, with those vegetables, those fresh vegetables. And they grew not only American vegetables, but they grew vegetables that were traditional to the Japanese diet. So that's sort of the background of everything. And they even built some beautiful, and I've seen pictures of them, beautiful ornamental gardens in those awful places. So that sort of sets the stage.
That's good.
Okay.
A quick overview of why this is important to me. As a young bride, I went out to California, and I started working for a Chinese company, a family who had 5 acres under glass, and they grew chrysanthemums and carnations, and they were the largest grower on the West Coast, ASEAN. And they had many, many Chinese immigrants that would come in and work, and they would be bussed in and out of San Francisco. But plenty of the wholesalers who came in to buy these plants, these beautiful big football lawns with 4-foot stalks, were Japanese. And I'm a friendly person. I started talking to some of these people, and I met a delightful older couple. And I was having my lunch under an apple tree, and this woman came over and said, "Do you mind if I join you?" And I said, "No, please come join me." I gave her a cup of tea, and we sat and we chatted. Turned out that she had been in one of these camps out in the desert. And I said, "I'm 22 years old." I said, "Aren't you still angry?" And she said, "No, I understand why they did it. I understand the fear, I understand the jealousy." She said, "It was hard, but it's in the past, and I have no anger." It just floored me, absolutely floored me. And we've always enjoyed Asian cooking and all, and I started looking a little bit more in depth into the Japanese methods of cooking and the different vegetables and things, and it just sort of grew on us. So as a Yankee, I probably cook about 4 meals every week that are Asian, mostly Japanese. So I'm going to talk about the types of plants that I'm bringing into the garden this year, and we'll have a conversation. If you have questions, raise your hand, because I'm not going to lecture you. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools. And there's an expression in Japanese called wabi-sabi. You're all probably familiar with feng shui, and you got to put your bed this way or that way to have good luck. Wabi-sabi is an interesting concept. It's an appreciation I believe it's Buddhist, but it's appreciation of things that are not perfect, things that are impermanent. So when you see a Japanese tool, which is a fantastic tool, it's really quite crudely made, but it's beautiful. And that is, in essence, wabi-sabi. A beautiful, functional, not perfect piece of art. And I use this every day in my garden. Other tools here, you're welcome to come up and see them. They're very sharp, so don't touch them. I'm going to show a little bit about how to cut vegetables on an Asian palette. And we'll talk about some of the foods. I mentioned earlier before you all got here that I've got some books. You're welcome to take pictures of the books. I don't lend them, but there are pictures of books here you can take. And let's go right through the vegetables to start. Okay, so here we are. And I think I was told how to do this. Is going to be this one. Yes. So peppers. Peppers are very important, both for flavoring your food, but they're also medicinal. And I've got peppers here that I grew in my garden at home last year. They're a paprika pepper. They're spicy, they're not hot. And they can be used in all sorts of recipes. So the Japanese in the camps grew peppers. And they would use them, as your grandmother or great-grandmother might have, for packing on the chest if you had a cold, for helping with the sinuses, all sorts of different things. So there's green and red peppers for using fresh, and we're all familiar with them. Eat them this way, or leave them another couple of weeks, and they are red. The same pepper, just a little bit more mature. Next one. Kale. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? Everybody was doing kale chips. Kale is probably one of the most nutrient-dense foods you can have. It's good for everything. If you take it very young, you can put it in a salad. You might want to strip the ribs off because that's a lot of fiber. Some of the, I was amazed, 206% of your daily value, people's daily value of vitamin A, 684 of K, 134% of C. I mean, it's more than an orange. It's cheaper than an orange and more sustainable. Low in calories. It's got, really good fiber, which is important. And it's even got protein, which I found was amazing. So, as I say, pass the kale, please. Bok choy is here we are. Bok choy is typical, and a lot of people don't know how to use it. I make a really good salad out of bok choy. What do you call that salad when you mix it up with mayonnaise and pineapple? Slaw? Coleslaw, exactly. You can use this for coleslaw, and it's so much sweeter and it's crisper than regular cabbage. So that's one thing you can do with it. And the one I'm doing this year from Baker Creek is the Purple Lady, and that's supposedly going to have a lot of antioxidants and anti-aging properties, which I can use. And the baby bok choy, you can steam small. 1 or 2 are perfect for 1 serving. So that is bok choy, and again, it's more nutrient dense and healthier than spinach and broccoli. This is a really neat one. The Nagasaki late cabbage. It looks like a regular Napa cabbage, but it's a gold, but this is not it. This is just a Napa cabbage. But it's a golden color, and it's so rich and healthy for you, or some are telling me. And I have not made this soup yet, but I think next year I will do it. The Japanese New Year's soup, ozoni. I'm going to try to pronounce this. This is chichunsai. It is a new superfood, and it's very sweet and mild, and it's got the 4 times vitamin A as carrots, which is very important for your eyesight. It's a cross between komatsuna and tatsoi. And it's got something called umami. It's the fifth flavor. Umami is something, if you're eating a well-aged cheese, you'll have that odd taste in the back of your tongue, and that is called umami. And it's very, very high, with several amino acids and nucleotides, which are your building blocks for RNA and DNA. And it's part of the phosphate group, which is very important to keep you healthy, particularly as we age. So the Golden Beauty Chinese cabbage came into Japan later, and they adopted it as a staple food. It's got tons of potassium and as much or more calcium than milk, but it's more bioavailable to you, so your body's going to absorb it more easily. It says the test is showing that this variety contains 40% more minerals than your standard green varieties of the same cabbage. This is all very important because when the Japanese were taken to these camps, they were on a military diet. We can all imagine what, if anybody's been in the Army or the armed services or have friends or relatives that have been, it's a very bland, not terribly nutritious, very bulky diet. So to be able to grow their own vegetables, these high nutrient-dense vegetables, helped them survive. And the guards even got involved with growing vegetables, and they included them in their diets as well. So it was a good thing for everybody. The Mizuno, which is called spider mustard, it doesn't have a high mustardy taste. It's much more mild. Exceptionally high in vitamin C and folate. And folate's very important for women who are pregnant. You know, I was talking about folic acid, so this is a good product, a good vegetable for that. And the glucinate, which is something that's good for your joints, used in all styles of cooking, salads, stir fry, steamed, in soups, and quickly deep fried with a batter in tempura. Swiss chard is grown all over the world. The Japanese have a type, Umania, and it is a member of the beet family, also known as sea kale, silver beet. We know it as silver, different colors. The Burby catalog's got probably 10 or 12 different colors. I eat it raw. It's a little bit bitter. Get it young. Very high in vitamin E. And if you cook it quickly, as my mom used to do the spinach in a cast iron pan, so you get the iron from the cast iron, a little bit of butter, high heat, stir fry it quickly, and you retain almost all your vitamins and minerals. Tomatoes. You would think that tomatoes are only Italian, but they're not. Japanese tomatoes are more wrinkly and warty, and I don't like dealing with them because they're too big and they're too watery. I like to do my tomatoes so that they can be dry. And when I cut these tomatoes about 1/4 inch, they thin down in the dehydrator, and you can use them instead of crackers. A little bit of goat cheese or whatever your favorite cheese is, and they are just delicious. So this is what we're doing this year in the garden. There's going to be the orange icicle, the black icicle, and we'll do some of the Italian Roma and San Lorenzo. Really, really important vitamin C and all the good red antioxidants. Okay, the daikon, or the white radish as people call it. This is a small one. I got it at the market. The ones we're going to grow are probably going to be twice this long, about the same diameter. These are very important to Japanese cuisine. They are carved for festival food. They're shredded up in very thin spaghetti strips that when you go out and get sushi, you'll see a little clump of them on your plate. They're
They can be hot, they can be mild. I think the ones that we're going to be growing is sort of in between, a little bit of a spicy snap, but basically mild. And they're wonderful for opening up the ground. They even have some called sod busters, and they're about 3 foot long and 6, 8 inches wide. Farmers will go out and plant these daikons in an open field. They're trying to prepare, let them grow all the way down, and then when winter comes and kills them, they rot away. So you've left with all these wonderful holes that fill with water, and the worms come in, and other things get in there, and it just breaks up the soil, and really, you don't have to do any tilling, or they're sometimes called tiller radishes. And of course, the carrots, vitamin A, but they're used in tempura, and they're also used for vegetable feasts and soups and things. Very, very important root vegetables. Onions and garlics, scallions. I thought we might be doing a raffle, but that really never got off the ground, Mike. So what we're going to do is, I have things here for people to take home if anybody's interested. I do have some of the last year's red dragon scallions. They've started to go to seed. They're still able to be planted. This means you'll be able to have seed for next year. And you can probably still take some of their green leaves and use them for cooking. They've got an odd flavor. They're oniony, but they're sort of floral at the same time. They're really nifty. We grew garlic in the garden this year, or we're growing garlic in the garden this year. And this is something that was left over from last year at home. So I hope that we'll have lots and lots to share with the food pantry. Let's see, what have we got? Oh, this is most important. Any allium is exceptionally toxic. It is deadly to cats and dogs. There are sulfur components in onions, garlics, shallots, any of the alliums that will cause liver failure to your pet. So do not give your pets anything with garlic. And I'm surprised because I've seen some ads for natural warmers that have garlic in them. No garlic should be given to cats and dogs, not at all. And our snap peas, we're going to be growing some snap peas. The last couple of years the peas have not done real well. The squirrels are not really good pea minders when I'm not there. But these are wonderful everyday cooking vegetables. The soybeans, I'm not going to grow soybeans in the garden because it takes up an awful lot of room and you only get 2 or 3 beans per pod. So they're very intense to manage. But they do make wonderful tofu, and I will buy dried soybeans and make my own tofu at home. And my kids were they grew up on it, and they just absolutely loved it. So to be able to produce this in the camps was exceptionally important. And soybeans will grow in a more arid area with very minimal irrigation. So where they could get enough irrigation and they grew the soybeans, they were able to make their tofu, and that's hugely important for protein. We are going to have, part of the garden this year is going to be for tea. And I could put in some chicory, but it's probably not worth the space. In the camps, because coffee and tea was exceptionally expensive, even if it was available, they grew the chamomile, they used the chicory root, roasted it for coffee. That was, even the soldiers were doing that. There are other herbs and things that we'll see in a minute. Growing your own herbal tea is a win-win-win. It's a wonderful thing, and it's very relaxing to sit down with a cup of chamomile tea. It's the old sleepy time tea. The mints, if you have room, and you don't mind them taking over, or you want ground cover, plant mint. There are so many different types of mint. There's chocolate mint, there's orange mint, there's peppermint. There are all sorts of mints. In fact, basil is part of the mint family. So we have mint out there, and I've been trying to eradicate. I'm going to put some in a long tube so that the roots can't easily and not quickly escape. So we'll have a tea garden. One of the things that I like best is the hyssops. And the anise hyssop is really a nifty plant. If you grab the flower or the young leaves and you munch on them, it'll almost make your tongue tingle. And dried, it's a just delightful, calming and yet spicy little tea that it keeps you going. It does both things. It's really nifty. Neat. The best thing though is it's got antibacterial properties. And of course you can bring your friends, the hummingbirds and the butterflies into your garden with it as well. So that is the prepared talk. Now I'd like to throw it out to the audience and see what you all are doing in your gardens, what you're interested in. If in my position as a master gardener, permaculture person, I can answer any questions for you. I'm happy to do that. So, what have we got? Any questions? Yes.
Raised beds, my raised beds are about 2 feet tall.
Yep.
And there's buccal culture in the bottom.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I was very successful with that last year. Only watered these beds about 3 times the entire summer.
Good. What did you put in the bottom of them?
It's branches and dead and decaying wood,
Leaves. Yep, good.
and then a layer of leaves, and then a layer of the native topsoil.
Yep.
And then the rest of it is compost.
Excellent.
And 2 inches about a shredded bark mulch on top.
Uh-huh.
So the bark mulch is all gone, I have it more compost for this year.
Yeah.
But my question is, do I or don't I put earthworms in there?
Earthworms will come. They're going to come from the bottom. You cannot avoid earthworms. The more material, what's the word I'm thinking of, the more organic material you have in your bed, particularly with hugelkultur, you're going to have earthworms galore. So if you don't want earthworms, you're going to have to
Oh, no, I
do it
want
less.
them.
Oh, no, they're there. I can guarantee you they're there. There will be probably the larger earthworms. You might get some little red wigglers if you are using compost from somewhere else, because they live just in the top of the soil. But the earthworms that were typical earthworms, night crawlers, come from up below.
Okay,
And if you want to get them really fast, the earthworm magnet is cardboard.
okay,
I have built, as they call it, spaghetti gardens. You put the cardboard down on your lawn,
lasagna.
and the lasagnas, right. So then you put a little bit of mulch, some leaves, and you just make it this way. Anytime I have put cardboard to store it, to use later in some place, it's gone in a couple of months because the earthworms come up and they chew it to pieces. Wow, they love it. I mean, it's a magnet. It really is.
I've been using that to get rid of grass.
Yep. And you're gonna grab more earthworms that way too.
Yeah, cool, okay.
Super. Anyone else? Oh, yep.
You'll have to forgive me. My hearing aid broke down midway through your program,
Well,
But,
so you've got, that's why I gave you the handout.
and that was a great help and beautifully done.
Well, thank you.
I was a kid in World War II, and I had a victory garden, and I planted carrots and radishes, and they all came up wormy. But I felt I was really helping the war effort.
You were.
And the government really encouraged that. The other aspect, I worked at Strawberry Bank in Portsmouth for many years, and there, the Abbott House is the World War II house. And one of the things that we were instructed to tell people was that the planting of victory gardens, yes, that was important, but the more important point for the government was that it got people outdoors. And this was psychologically, physically a good thing for people. So I think it's kind of interesting that they did that, you know, to get people out. And we all know that, I mean, we've been experiencing it certainly lately, how much better we feel when we can get outdoors, and now we can get out in our gardens, and
Absolutely.
I think that's important.
But, Mike, you can correct me on this, but didn't the Victory Gardens actually start with World War I?
They did have them in World War I.
Right.
World War II, I think, was better advertised by the government.
Right, yeah.
And you're absolutely right, and particularly for people who lived in cities, who didn't go out a lot, who stayed in their apartments. You're right about people going out too, because, is that going? Can you hear me with that? Because in the cities, they didn't come out a lot, but they did communal gardens, like we do now, and they would come out and raise things out in the communal gardens, and they would even raise things in window boxes and things, so people would open the windows that maybe they wouldn't open the windows during the certain season, and it really did get them out. And of course, the major thing was that everybody felt as if they were making an effort and making a contribution to the war effort, and that was the big thing. And of course, a lot of people did. My mother lived on a farm, so she said, you know, Victory Garden wasn't a Victory Garden, it was their garden, you know. But for a lot of people that didn't have a garden, usually the Victory Garden was very, very important.
In Boston, the Fells Parkway,
I think it's the Fells Parkway is still a community garden, and it is the oldest existing community garden in this country. And it has been going since World War I at least. So I think everybody needs to garden, even if it's just a little pot of tomatoes on the step wherever you've got some sun. It really does good for you to be able to do that, to get out and do the gardening. Now, is anybody interested in odd lot information about cooking Japanese food? Okay. If I were going to do a dinner, I might or might not have a meat protein. Generally I will, you know, it's chicken or fish or, not goat. There wasn't anything on those goats, but anyway. A little bit of meat, but a lot of vegetables. The vegetables you see here are always used, many of them, not just one or two, there's a whole slew of vegetables you can throw in and stir fry. I will say that if I don't take anything else home with me tonight, I'm going to take my wok home, because I cook everything in my wok except really soup. This wok is not quite as old as I am, but it's as old as I've been married, so 51 years old, and it's kind of beat up, but it's steel. It's a mild steel, and it will rust, but it's so well seasoned, I can put it and let it soak overnight, and it doesn't rust unless I expose the wet metal to air. So we're getting some iron and other minerals every time we cook with it. I use chopsticks to lift things and turn things around. These are not cheating chopsticks. They are held by a string. But when you're cooking very hot things at a distance, having them tied together really helps. The little spatula is for scraping the bottom and all the good things that stick to the hot bottom of the wok and incorporating that into your meal. This is my friend. Vegetables cower when they see me pick this up. And it's interesting because when you're cooking in an Asian manner, you're not going to just cut things willy-nilly. There's an art to cutting things. Generally on the bias, different directions. It's just an amazing attitude that the Japanese housewife has toward her food. She really cares about the presentation. And I'll say that, you know, Japanese husbands, whoever's in the kitchen, really pays attention to the presentation and cutting things at just the right angle and just the right thickness. Let's see what else we have here.
Oh, yes, so tell us how, you just like start whacking.
Okay, I'm going to put this down. I'm going to just cut a few things and show you the difference. Hold on.
Because I've always wanted one, but I'm it's a little, like a sledgehammer.
Well, we'll start with the celery. So the celery is now just, cut the top off. Most American or Western cultures will just cut the celery straight across. In an Asian kitchen, you'll cut on the bias, and you might also cut in a reverse bias. So you've got some interesting shapes here. It's not just chopped celery. So when you pick this up and put it in your mouth, it's going to feel different. I mean, the whole experience of food preparation and eating is more thoughtful. I mean, that's the way I think.
So the technique is to apply the blade and then push down rather than.
Well, you can slice or you can push. I tend to push, depending upon what I'm doing. But again, it's angled. These books and other books, you can go online. There are all sorts of techniques, but it's a more thoughtful process than just chop, 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 and throw it into the stew pot, you know, the crock pot, just toss everything in. It's more, I have to say, it's more of an art form. So we're going to put that there. If I were to take this, okay, we've got slices of pepper. There's pepper. But if you apply a little art to it, you now have pepper that kind of looks and feels different in your mouth. And it certainly is pretty in the bowl or on the plate.
Aren't there seeds in there though?
Well, yeah, there are some seeds, but I would probably strip the seeds out before I started. I'm just playing here. And also there are, even with this big, unwieldy tool,
Drawing across the vegetable.
you can get some very lovely thin slices. This is very sharp, and I sharpen it frequently.
What do you use to sharpen it with?
I have, my husband's got a whetstone, and I also have a steel. Typically, it's not sticking to my fingernail, so it's a little dull. Ooh, that is sharp. That is not moving. So if you put it on your fingernail and it digs in enough and it's not moving. So this is, what else could we talk about?
Now we're afraid.
Yeah. I didn't speak about ginger. Ginger. Ginger is good for everything. It's good for your tummy upsets. It's good for, not colicky babies, but you know, grumpy kids who don't want to go to sleep. You can make a cup of chamomile tea and you can put a little bit of ginger in it and it just soothes everything. It's just dried and candied. It is the best thing in the world for a snack. It puts zest and zing into all your meals. I just absolutely adore ginger. And I've got a pot here with a lovely hand of ginger. They call these hands because it looks like fingers. And if you go on to WikiHow, it will walk you through how to grow this ginger. I have grown ginger, I haven't done it the last 2 years, but here in New England, I have grown ginger every year and had it be 2-3 feet tall. The cat loves it, so I have to keep it in the room where the cat doesn't go. And it's just delightful. It's very hard to get fresh ginger. If you go into one of the larger cities to an Asian market, you will find ginger that is so fresh, and baby ginger is almost pink. And it's got very little of the fiber and the strings that you're familiar with, because what we get in most of our markets are old, dried out hands of ginger. The recipe for growing this is to soak it for 8 or 12 hours in warm water, and then plant it in a shallow dish about 1/2 inch under the soil, uncover it, keeping it moist but not wet so it doesn't rot. So in this pot, I've got 1 inch of sharp sand and then the next couple of 3 inches of compost. So it's all set to go for whoever wants to step up here and get it. Some of the things that are typical in a Japanese kitchen will be soba noodles. I'm trying to be gluten-free because my husband's gluten intolerant. It's very hard to find soba noodles that don't have any wheat in them. They should be just buckwheat. If you keep looking or go online, you will find soba noodles that are buckwheat. Buckwheat is not a grain, it's a fruit. And growing buckwheat's kind of fun. It's a wonderful compost material, it's a wonderful green manure, but it's very hard to process at home. So soba is wonderful in soups. Miso. Miso is a fermented rice. It is a rice and soybean fermented with koji, which is very similar to the process that you make. Where is it? Sake. Sake is a fermented rice drink. But this will be a wonderful soothing soup. You can use it for a pick-me-up. You can use it for a main meal. You can throw a little bit into your gravy. It's just very, very useful. Real black beans, salted, fermented black beans. I've also got some tangerine peel in them. And this is what you make your true black bean sauce from. The black bean sauce you get in the store that's already made is just fermented black beans. It's not really thoughtfully done. It's commercial. You could make so much better with this. A little bit of sugar, a little vinegar, some crushed garlic, and oh, you got a really good meal here. Kombu, seaweed. They are growing kombu in Maine since the big, the nuclear power plant that blew up in Japan. Nobody is looking to buy the Japanese kombu because all of that area has been kind of decimated. So the Korean kombu is probably your safer bet, or better yet, find some coming out of Maine. Seaweed, very, very high in minerals, vitamins, and it's just a great food. It's a superfood. And you can eat this as a snack. The thinner types, you wrap around rice for your sushi, or eat toasted as a little snack when you're having your glass of sake. Bean thread noodles are wonderful if you can't eat spaghetti because you're avoiding wheat. These work just as well with tomato sauce, but they're just a neat also called glass noodles in the Chinese culture. This is dried shaved bonito, and it is used as a base in most of your soups. You have a soup base that you make up, and you need to have this. If you want to be a real purist, you will spend $1,000 to buy a block of dried bonito that comes in a beautiful pine box with a plane that you shave off your own pieces. And it is like truffles. It's that special. But this does just as well.
So what's in bonita?
It is a type of tuna fish. Bonito is a type of tuna fish.
And so in the bag, it's pure tuna fish, it's not additives of any kind?
No. This is just shaved commercial bonito. I mean, it's fine, it's excellent. But to get the holy of holies, you want to buy the one that comes in the Torrey pine box that smells like incense cedar. And it's a block about 2 or 3 inches by 2 inches, and it literally has a plane that you push that block of dried tuna fish across and get your shavings.
Wow.
And there is nothing quite like it. I had a friend who had been married to a Japanese gentleman, and he would cook dinner, and he would go into the back cabin, he would take out his block of tuna, he'd shave it off. It was just amazing. Sesame oil is the go-to oil when you're doing this type of cooking. I like the toasted sesame oil better than I like plain sesame oil, but if I'm doing a salad, I'll probably use the plain sesame oil. Plain sesame oil also makes a pretty nice massage oil. It's not as light as almond oil, but it's very nice. And fish sauce goes across the board in almost all Asian cuisine. This one is made, I believe, in Thailand. But it is mostly anchovies and other things, but the balance is something that I can't do on my own, so I always buy the fish sauce, and I use this when I'm making soups. Shiitake mushroom, anti-aging, and it's really good stuff. You can buy it already dried, imported, or you can buy it at the market here and dry it yourself. Dried mushrooms have a whole different flavor range than fresh mushrooms because you've concentrated, like when you dry anything, you've concentrated all the essential flavors down. And when you then put it into liquid, it just bursts open with the essence of whatever you've dried. This is particularly true with mushrooms. Peppers. We talked about peppers. I grew peppers every year, and some of them I dry, and I don't use too many of them because a little goes a long way. These are the peppers I'm going to grow in the garden. As I say, they're a paprika pepper. The seeds are a little bit spicier than the flesh, like with most peppers. So I think you could probably, figure out your taste, how much you want to put into any meal. Let's see. This is a mochi stick. It's like a mortar. Maybe it is a mortar. The mortar is the vessel, so this is the pestle. Mochi is a sweet rice dessert. And you just pound the cooked rice, and pound it and pound it and pound it, and add your sweeteners. I don't make it, but this was a gift from somebody, and I just think it's very artistic and kind of neat.
And now they make ice cream out of that.
Aha. I have used this frequently. It's called the shiragashi, and it is for grinding up your sesame to make a sesame paste. You can see that this is a ceramic with lines cast into it, and it's just a neat tool. And sometimes you just need it, and you can't use your Cuisinart.
Keep the power outage.
I collect sake sets. The more interesting sake sets, I left home obviously, but sake is a ritual, and it is equal to or better than the French wine culture. It is just nifty, and there are so many flavor spectrums in sake. I could talk all night about them if I knew enough about them. I've got my favorites. I toured the sake brewery out in Berkeley, where this one came from, Shochubai, and it was fascinating, and they did give us the samples, which was really nice, much better than going to Budweiser. This might look like a tea whisk, it's not, it's for scrubbing your pots and pans. And it comes with its own bamboo holder. Again, thoughtful, wabi-sabi, not perfect, but very natural. And we have all sorts of chopsticks. Your general everyday chopstick, which is kind of blunt and much easier to grab things with. The more formal, pointy ones are a little bit more difficult to use. Gardening tools. Hori, the Japanese garden knife, gardener's friend. You can get through anything except solid stone with this. It cuts roots, it slices things, it digs and levers. This is full tang, almost full tang. But it is about 12 years old, and I bought this in California at one point, and it's just, I can't kill it and I wouldn't want to, but it's wonderful. This is a carving axe. I do a little bit of wood carving. You would hold it here and you would shave your piece. It's not for chopping wood. You might, but I use it for carving things. I could have brought you some of my northern Hokkaido Japanese rice that we grew a number of years ago. At the camps, some places had enough water to irrigate the rice fields. You don't have to do paddy rice. Paddy rice is to keep the terrestrial weeds down, to keep the grass from growing and competing with the rice. Upland rice is just as nutritious, and this would be something you would cut the rice with, or any other weed that gets in your way. Your handy dandy little, keep it in your pocket because it folds saw, so you can be trimming branches and other things as you're out there in the garden. I have abused this poor saw, and I've got to get my son-in-law to send me a new one. It is very fine on one side, very open. That would be for a longitudinal cut, ripping, and this would be a cross cut. Very, very flexible. If you were doing something that needed to be cut close to the wall, this would be your tool you might use. Another wonderful weed killer and trench opener. Because it's got the hole here, you don't have to worry about moving all that soil because a lot of it will just run right through, and then you can just go sideways to clean it out. The shears are, again, wabi-sabi. They're very organic. Sharp, useful. Over here, I did just a little ikebana, very crudely, but you can come in and just snip things off. I don't think I've missed any. Yes?
Where do you buy these tools? I've never seen some of them.
Well, I can tell you that if you go online to Shelter Institute, they're up in Maine, can't think of exactly where, they will sell you any and all of these and a whole lot more. They bring them in because they do courses of post and beam. It's called Shelter Institute. The Japanese will come to America and buy their tools from Shelter Institute rather than buying them at home because of the gap. The taxes are so huge buying things apparently in Japan. That's what the folks at Shelter Institute told me when I was up at the, what is that fair? Common Ground Fair. That's where I bought a couple of these, right? So, what have I missed?
Kristen, do you want to tell them where you can buy seeds for the?
Absolutely, yes. I think I might have mentioned it earlier, but I will do that here again. We have Kitazawa Seed Company. They are a Japanese family who are over 100 years old. They actually experienced this whole thing. They had a wonderful seed company. It was shut down. Luckily, they were able to regroup when they came home from the camps. Some people were really fortunate that they had non-Japanese friends and neighbors that would hold their property or buy their house and then sell it back to them. Most people were not that fortunate. There was a huge jealousy because the Japanese would work, their families would work, the little ones would work, the grandmothers would work, and the American Western farmer would just, he'd hire migrant workers or he'd work so long and then say, no, I'm going to go have my big dinner or whatever. There was a cultural difference that allowed the Japanese farmers to succeed where the American farmers didn't and couldn't. And there was a huge jealousy. And that was part of that backlash. It's unfortunate, but these folks survived and they've got wonderful, wonderful Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and American and Italian vegetables. Baker Creek is unique. Again, a family-owned business. They're down in the Ozarks, and Carroll, the young man who started it probably 20, maybe 25 years ago, when he was in his teens, traveled around the world, particularly in South America, gathering native plants and bringing home the seeds, and maybe smuggling them, I'm not sure, but in any case, he's got a wonderful community down there in the Ozarks. It's Baker Creek Seeds. And they have got, they actually bought, I think it's Ferry Morse or the Comstock Fair in Fairfield, Connecticut. They bought the company before it was taken over by Big Ag or torn down and the buildings destroyed. So they bought that and have restored it. So Baker Creek is the other one. And of course, Johnny's Seeds up in Maine is excellent for a lot of these seeds as well. So we may be to the point where who would like to grow some garlic?
I
Okay.
said it was ginger.
Ginger. Suki, I'll get you another one, Suki. There you go.
Thank you.
Now we have six packs here, and they have got some of the vegetables I showed up on the screen. They look a little limp because I had to transplant them 2 days ago. The 6 packs I planted specifically for giving away tonight didn't do well. You know, it scarred me. So I've got a tomato, I've got the 2 tomatoes, I've got the chichobai, and I've got a golden. I should have made that list. If you take them and then email me, I'll give you my card, you can email me, I'll tell you what you got. I should have made cards for them. I was so disappointed, I had all these six-packs I planted up, and they were just very spotty. So there are 6 of those, and then we have these.
Have raffles.
So there are 2 groups of those. And these are the red dragon, which I planted in the garden 2 or 3 years ago. These were at home. And they are going to be biennial this year. They're going to put up seed heads. The seed heads have started on this one. They haven't on this, but if you plant these, they will develop a seed head. You save the seeds and plant them next year. So I think there's probably one of those for everybody here. You cannot have my walk. I need to cook dinner tonight.
Oh.
We did.
Thank you, Christin.
You're welcome. Thank you.